Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of The Red Lettuce. I'm your host, Ryan. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Fox and Eric. Um, and I'm stoked about our guest today, a friend of mine and an amazing independent journalist, Alina Duarte. Alina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, thanks for inviting me first. Yes, I'm a Mexican and independent journalist. I was working for teleSUR for the last 6 years. I was a correspondent in Washington, D.C. Then I started my life as an independent journalist, and I had the opportunity to cover the protests in Chile, in Ecuador. Recently, I'm trying to follow what's going on in Bolivia, and hopefully I'll be there soon when they open the borders, because they're still closed. So let's see what happens. And yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to
Thank
have
you
you
for
on.
joining us.
Yeah. So our first question and the first thing we wanted to talk to you about was Bolivia. As you mentioned, you had plans to go there, and then the pandemic hit, if I'm not mistaken. And so we have just heard that the elections have been postponed for a third time. And after last year's military coup that ousted Evo Morales. So I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts are after this news broke that the elections are postponed for a third time, and if you have any predictions or just insights into what's going on the ground there.
Well, actually, Bolivia is what we have seen during the last months. It's like a total media blackout. The most that we've seen is that there was a coup, and actually the narratives were for a long time that there was an electoral fraud, and it wasn't. Also, the New York Times, the MIT, the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington, D.C., they showed that there wasn't a coup, there wasn't a fraud, that it was a coup. And during the last months, what we have seen, it's a complete military dictatorship in Bolivia. And the rest of the world actually don't know that during the last 2 or 3 months, dozens of indigenous people were killed under this government in Sacaba and Sencata. There was this massacre just a month after the coup, and now they are seeking for justice. And of course, the government is doing anything. They're not investigating anything. They're not doing anything about this specifically. And postponing the elections is just the last step that this de facto government has done after they killed these people, after they prosecuted another one, after they have been harassing a lot of the militants of the party of Evo Morales, MAS, the movement towards socialism. And a lot of people actually is now exiled here in Mexico, dozens of them, foreign ministers or just militants. It's a complete mess, and they are still trying to running for the elections. But under these circumstances, I think uh, it's almost impossible, even when they are trying to have these candidates, Lucho Arce and David Choquehuanca. Lucho Arce was the former Minister of Economy in Bolivia, who's responsible of that successful economy now in Bolivia after 14 years of this past government. Actually, even the World Bank or the IMF or these institutions, they cannot deny that there was a complete success in Bolivia after Evo Morales' administration in these 14 years. So the next, I don't know, people have been calling for elections and also for mobilizations after this announcement that they are trying to postpone these elections. They were gonna take place in May 3rd, and they canceled because of the pandemic, and they said that they were gonna take place in September 6th, and now they're gonna take place hopefully in October 18th. So I don't know, people are just tired of uh, this situation. Actually, now they don't have food, they don't have medicines, they don't have hospitals to go if they just get sick because of the COVID. And the situation is really, really bad. And I think me as as a journalist, the thing that worries me the most is that it's a complete media blockade, blackout in Bolivia.
Elena, I'm wondering if you could elaborate on the role of the United States government in this coup for our viewers, and go into some of the details there. How is the U.S. government helping this dictatorship maintain its power? How did it assist with the coup? And there was another one that I came up with on the top of my head that I totally forgot. It'll come back to me.
Yes, well, I wish that this was the first time that the U.S. is involved in a coup in Latin America. Sadly, it is not. It's like a script that we've seen during decades, and this is what is going on every single day against Bolivia. This is what we've seen in everywhere. Actually, this is like I'm still like frustrated.
It's never ended.
It's Operation Condor Part 2, right?
It is absolutely, and it's so frustrating for me as a journalist, or just as a Latin American reporter, or just as a Latin American person, like as a Latina. This is every single day something like this happens in our country. They're trying to steal our resources, and this is not the first time. So this is a kind of script, as I said, like the U.S. Department recognized the government that is having this operation against a democratically elected government, as we've seen in Honduras in 2009 with Manuel Zelaya. The U.S. Department, and now I'm really thankful with Donald Trump that we don't have to wait, for 50 years and to see these documents. We just need to see their Twitter accounts. As with Bolton, it was the same, that we're looking for oil in Venezuela. And this is so cynical. And now in Bolivia, and this is something that it has to be with what happened recently with Elon Musk tweets, that Evo Morales said so just the day after the coup, and he was saying, this is about our natural resources, this is about the lithium, this is about the U.S. imperialism in our countries, and I remember that there were so many editorials in the New York Times, or just these people saying like, oh no, this is just a false idea of the communist people, and they are trying to blame on whoever, And now
you tankies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now that we see these cynical tweets of Elon Musk just saying like, yeah, deal with it. It's it's, and for me, it's not like, oh my God, how can he say so? It's like, no, really, this is normal. Yeah, no, but it's frustrating that even with this kind of proofs, people are still wondering if imperialism is just an idea, it's just a conspiration or something like that, a conspiracy. It's like,
and they know they're participating in. They know that it benefits them. They know that they could support anyone, Joe Biden or Donald Trump, and they're going to get what they want either way. So it doesn't really, it doesn't matter to them, because their foreign policy angle is always the same. It's overthrow the democratically elected government, replace with like you said, it's a script.
Yeah, and imperialism, it's for me, when people ask me, I was living in Washington, D.C. for the last 3 years and a half. I just moved back to Mexico. And when people used to ask me like, who do you think it's gonna be better for Latin America, Democrats or Republicans? For me, it's like, I don't even care, It's like, I don't give a fuck. It's just the same. It's, for us, it's like, yeah, well, I would prefer a self-proclaimed president or a bomb, That's the question. That's the big difference. It's like, yeah, well, I would prefer an invasion. I would prefer, yeah, you know, it's like, how do we as a Latin American people prefer to be stolen by the US and their companies? It's like, who,
Right.
you know, that's a big difference. Even in Venezuela, I was reading an article written by Leonardo Flores, who is a Venezuelan and who worked for the Venezuelan embassy. And he was saying like the big difference between, because they call now something like Magazuela, you know,
Yeah.
for the people of Venezuela who supports Donald Trump, it's the Magazuela thing. And now it's just the people who support Biden, Latinos, Venezuelans for Biden. And the big difference is like if they're gonna give like tricks to Venezuelans with the TPS or things like that. But at the end, I don't know if you remember when the State of the Union, the one of the only moments that both Democrats and Republicans were just like clapping was when Juan Guaido, the self-proclaimed president of Venezuela, was there, you know, and both Nancy Pelosi, Mike Pence, and Donald Trump, you know, and that's the like the resume of the foreign policy in Latin America of the U.S. Imperialism, it's sustained by both parties. It's not about Democrats or Republicans. They coincide in every single way. So yeah, it's so sad and it's so cynical what we saw with Elon Musk, but at the same time, it's not a surprise for us in Latin America. It's like, well, yeah, we said so, but we were just communists and we were, you know, and it was true. At the end, it was a complete truth, no?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely not surprising to see that hot garbage take from an imperialist whose family made their money off the backs of Africans and mines in South Africa that, you know, his father stole like their wealth from. So it really just speaks to that, you know, the imperialist shit apple doesn't fall far from the imperialist shit tree.
Yeah, completely. And I'm so like, at the end, this is something about frustration. Like, how can we communicate not only as a journalist, but as a people from Latin America, that we cannot stop it. We cannot stop the U.S. government. The only ones who can stop the U.S. government are the U.S. citizens. So that's pretty frustrating, you know, that when you try to communicate, or in my role as a journalist, it's like, yeah, I try to do my best, but at the end, even staying in the U.S., just being there reporting was really hard because I could be deported whenever they want. It's like they decide who is able to stay in the U.S. and who is not. So when you go to this solidarity or with organizations and this movement, it's frustrating because even when we know that we cannot like obligate, yeah, you said well said, yeah, people to show solidarity. It's like, it's not only about solidarity, it's like we are dying because people in the US is doing nothing to stop their government. So it's pretty hard, you know, it's pretty hard that we are just seeing what is going on now in Bolivia, and that a lot of indigenous people were murdered because the US government and because Elon Musk wanted their lithium. And now it's like nothing happens. Just nothing happens.
Yeah, liberals are the harbingers of fascism. Truly. We've been screaming at the top of our lungs since the primary started that, you know, we're only going to capitulate so many of our values for so many candidates, and they're propping up the worst one that they could, the Democrats with Joe Biden. And, you know, they give all of these talking points about, you know, both parties. They say, oh, socialism in Venezuela is not working. They have to stand in line for toilet paper. And then COVID hits and we have a toilet paper shortage and indigenous people are being murdered under the government we propped up. So I just think it's really, really interesting how little liberals in America don't understand their government, and they don't understand what they're supporting and what they're asking of leftists and socialists and communists in the United States to support their candidate. We're tired of giving our representative power to these people who all they do is they steal resources for their friends' companies, and they bomb brown people all over the world. And you know, we're tired of it. People are not falling for it anymore, and hopefully it'll we'll overthrow it, or it'll just collapse, and it'll just be a shitstorm either way, I think.
Yeah, and actually how the US government can blame on communists when we see what's going on now in Portland. And now what's going on in Portland, it's exactly what the US has been doing against the Latin American people and against the rest of the world, and in the best of the cases, because when I see Portland and I see like a lot of people, it's just like, how is it possible? It's like, well, yeah, but it happens all the time, for example, in the border, because even now the CBP is the one who are in so many cities, or were in so many cities. And I was in the border, and you know, it's shocking to be there. And because we are Latinos, we don't matter. People don't care, you know, and CBP is doing that every single day. I was last year in the border, and I remember that at some point, just CBP started shooting at us, and people, instead of running away from CBP, they tried, even when CBP were shooting and was shooting at us, this officer, people still tried to cross the border, you know, because what they have in their countries, most of the cases, because of the US government, because of the role of the US in the civil war in El Salvador, because of the role of the US in the coup in Honduras in 2009, because of the US, you know, because of the US, we are in the border, and they're trying to cross that border. And that happens all the time. They shoot at people in the border all the time, and they don't care. And I mean, the US citizens, like, yeah, what you see in Portland, I saw it in the border during a whole month that I stood there, and that still continues there. You know, it's shocking, because yeah, I know it's hard to see what's going on in Portland. It's so shocking. It's I was in DC, and also in Lafayette Square in front of the White House. It's hard, I know, but it's like, yeah, the US has been doing this for decades against us.
Yeah, and maybe you can go into for us, for those that aren't really familiar with the political situation there in Bolivia, just maybe talk about like the characteristics of Christian fascism there now.
Well, yeah, now the government of Yanine Áñez, she's a fascist, and we don't have to say like, oh my God, maybe she's a kind of Democrat. It's like, no way, no, she's a complete fascist. She's killing people. She has been helping the US, like in these cases, as we said, with the lithium. She was a senator, and because of the military forces asked for the how you say it, ask Evo to resign. Actually, the one who had to be the president, or the interim president, was the leader of the Congress, of the Senate. I don't remember her name now, but she said like, I'm not gonna be part of this coup. I'm not gonna legitimate this coup. So I'm not gonna take power, or whatever it was. So she declined also. So the next, like in the line of who needed to be president, was Yanine Áñez, and actually her her duty was just to call for elections. And I mean, the coup was in November, the elections were in October, and the coup was in November, in the beginning of November. And the only thing she had to do was asked for elections. And now it's almost like 8 or 9 months after the coup, and she's still in power. And she's still in power, and now the only thing that I consider has helped for not consolidate this dictatorship is that even the right wing in Bolivia is broken. Now the far right is still asking for a military dictatorship. Yanine Añez just to want to be, like the popular person, like if she was in college, and she wants to be the president even when she doesn't know anything about anything, and now there are a lot of it's very, there's no like a union in the far right in Bolivia, and that's why the favorite candidate for the next elections, whenever they're gonna take place, is still the MAS. It's still the party of Evo Morales. They have more than 45% of the votes. In the polls. And that's why they are trying to postpone, because they want that they need time just to let to prohibit the MAS go into the elections. They are trying to call Evo Morales a terrorist, the candidate too. They've been trying to do a lot of things, but people, as they did on the elections in October, they are gonna vote for the MAS, even with their mistakes. As I said, like they show that there is another way to build a society in a successful way, not in a neoliberal way. They proved that the cooperatives, the COPs, that the indigenous people can be part of the government, that they can take their own decisions, that they prove that there are so many ways to be a real government, a democratically elected government. And that's why the opposition don't know. And of course, imagine after having a complete, like a successful coup, they're not gonna allow the MAS just to win, like, oh, okay, here you have the power again. It's like, no, they're not gonna do that. So yeah, that's why there's a lot of tension now. People are still in the streets, even with the COVID. They've been doing a lot of rallies, a lot of protests during the last month, especially during the last 3 weeks. This week they're gonna have another mobilizations in the whole country. There are thousands of people in the streets, and that's something that of course you're not gonna see in TV. You're gonna watch in TV or listen in the radio. It's something that is still going on, and that's why it was so important to give this space to talk about what Elon Musk did, because it's not only about tweets, it's about it's thousands of people who are seeking for justice, who are looking for a democratically elected government, and they're gonna stay in the streets. They're not gonna go home and just wait, because they're dying. They're dying because of lack of food or of COVID. And that's so sad.
So when that, you said you were living in the United States, were you in DC when the coup happened?
Where I was? No, actually, I was in Chile. I was covering the protests in Chile. That it's pretty common of what happened in the US. Actually, there's a lot of similarities with with a leadership, just the people tired of everything and just taking the streets every single day in October, in November. And I was there, and it's interesting. It was not a coincidence that a massive mobilization like what it happened in Chile happened there, because neoliberalism started in Chile. It was the first country when they say like, yeah, let's gonna try here how the city looks living under neoliberalism. And it's not a coincidence that something like that happened after the pandemic in the US, when you can see so clear the contradictions of the systems, the inequality, when you see all of the injustice in a society like in the US. So I was there. I was thinking going to Bolivia because I was near, but no, it was pretty even traumatic to be in Chile. Exactly what happens in Portland, it happens every single day in every single city in Chile. And I was a little bit tired. I recorded 2 documentaries with Redfish, so you can watch them.
Love Redfish. Love
Yeah, please.
We'll link those. We'll link those.
Yeah, link them.
Yeah, we talk about how like the relation of neoliberalism, Chile, and in other societies. So yeah, it was shocking because actually it was more than shocking because I was in Chile and I went to my friend's house where I was staying, and the same day that the coup started, it was the day that they put in freedom Lula. Lula was free that the same day. So we were like, oh yeah, Lula was free, and we were celebrating. And an hour after was like, what the fuck is going on in Bolivia? There was a lot of emotions. I was like, the police was next to me in the window, and it was smelling to tear gas, and we were clapping because of Lula. And at the same time, it was like a lot has happened in Latin America during the last months.
Yeah, I wanted to switch coups to talk about Venezuela a little bit, just so our audience knows. Alina and I met outside of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. last year when the U.S. and the opposition outside of the embassy were trying to illegally seize it and eventually did seize it. So basically a lot has happened in Venezuela since then as it relates to Venezuela, especially during the pandemic. The US placed a $15 million bounty on Nicolas Maduro's head. And then there was kind of another coup attempt, really bizarre situation where US mercenaries tried to essentially invade Venezuela to either kidnap or kill Maduro. So yeah, I would just love to know what you think about what's happened since we last saw each other, really.
Well, for me, Venezuela is not only like a personal lesson in my life. I think we all have to learn more about Venezuela and to dismantle these narratives around what happened during the last 20 years in that country. So Venezuela, this is just the last phase of imperialism, US imperialism against Venezuela. During the last year, we've seen the self-proclamation of Juan Guaido more than a year ago. We've seen, as you said, like more sanctions. I don't know if they can put more sanctions against more people now in Venezuela. They've sanctioned almost everyone down there. And we've seen the UK, not only the US, the UK stole their gold. It's like, it's not only about the US imperialism, it's like all of these coalition against a sovereign nation like Venezuela. And for me, there's like only a reason why the US can't like invade or just succeed in a coup in Venezuela, and it's because of the people. During the last 20 years, they learned that what is imperialism. When you go to Venezuela and you talk to people, they know that the economic situation in Venezuela, it's not because of the government. It's because a series of US sanctions, because when they had money, the government use it for food, for education, healthcare. It's just impressive, like to see the. For example, it's something that even here in Mexico or in the rest of Latin America, it's really hard to understand. It's the right of housing. Housing is a right, and we don't understand it until we go to Venezuela and we see that just because you are a Venezuelan, you deserve a house, you deserve a place to sleep. And they have given around 3 million houses for the last 20 years. They just give the 3 million house like a month ago. And it's something unbelievable. Under a crisis, under a pandemic, under a systematic harassment of the US, they still continue their process. So now it's hard, of course, and that's why they've been taking like a lot of they've been doing a lot of things under the pandemic. They took it really seriously since day one, because they cannot allow like their country under COVID. It was already hard every single day for Venezuelans. So now with the pandemic, the government said like, okay, you have to stay into your house. We're gonna take care of everything. And they did until they could, because of course they cannot just people cannot just sit down and see what happens under a pandemic. The situation is really hard, and it's something that even the government is not denying all the time. They're saying like, this is so hard, we need to do more than we've done. And of course it's not, there are a lot of contradictions, of course, in the Venezuelan government, but I mean, it's like when we see that they build houses, that they build hospitals, that they had this relationship with the Cuban doctors, that now they're saving thousands of lives all around the world.
Imagine that, communists saving the world.
Yeah, it's like the US just can't put troops and bombs and, steal our resources. They cannot save our lives. That the reality and this narrative was that the US can save every single human in the world, and now the one who are saving are the communists. No,
right. Yeah. Meanwhile, the US is sanctioning the world and bombing it, but meanwhile, the communist or socialist states of the world are enacting an international solidarity.
Yeah, for example, here in Mexico, the Chinese government sent like 20 airplanes of like supplies for the COVID,
Wow.
And yeah, it's like, go and blame someone else, the communists, or for example, now in Vietnam.
Those genocidal communists in China sending you food and supplies.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly. It's like, I'm gonna survive.
For free for everybody.
Yeah, like I'm gonna survive because of my communist mask. Yeah, it's like, and it's real,
Yeah.
when so there's like in Vietnam, no one is talking about Vietnam, but they have like almost no cases.
No cases, nothing.
Or in Kerala, that it's a communist state in India, they don't have cases because the communist government took, and these narratives are so funny, but at the same time, there are so many people who still believe that are true, after the years. And now, if there are not the Russians or the Chinese and whatever, but so in Venezuela, it's not the exception. In Venezuela, we've seen a lot of real propaganda against Venezuela for the last 20 years. And it's amazing what they've done. I'm really surprised every single time that I talk to my friends, and they're like, if I'm gonna die of COVID or if I'm gonna die, it's because of COVID or because of defending my country, and it's hard. It's just amazing to listen to them. And I know there are so many American Venezuelans who are just saying like, ask a real Venezuelan. It's like, I asked the Venezuelan in Venezuela, not in the US.
Also, it's not mentioned enough, but Venezuela, they they had a program to also help U.S. citizens here to heat their homes, right?
Yeah, it was a program established by Hugo Chavez, and I don't know, there every single day, like it's more difficult, and of course after the U.S. stole Citgo, of course it's gonna be harder, but yeah, during the Chavez administration, thousands of people in the U.S. citizens, were even in the Bronx, for example, or in Maryland, in Baltimore, so many people like they don't die because of the communist help, you know. And yeah, Hugo Chavez had this idea of with like having no borders, like,
Right.
and I mean, I'm totally agree, we are not just the borders, don't matter when we are trying to help each other. And of course Hugo Chavez tried to help Palestine, try to
Mhm.
help, you know, every single nation that needed help. Venezuela was there, and there was even Latin America before and then after Hugo Chavez, completely different. So there are so many lessons of the Venezuelan process during the last 20 years. I'm just trying to give the highlights, but Venezuela, it's under a war every single day, and I think even the humanity, we don't deserve a Venezuela in our lives. It's just too much what they have given to us during the last 20 years.
Yeah,
They've also given us teleSUR as well, which is,
exactly.
you know, those
We love teleSUR.
Chavez helped found teleSUR, right?
Yeah, it was founded by Hugo Chavez, Evo Morales, you know, these progressive governments. 15 years ago, actually last week, was like the birthday of teleSUR, and it was created exclusively to dismantle these hegemonic narratives all around the world. And that's why they started to doing this content in English too, not only in Spanish, because Hugo Chavez knew that, as I was saying, like if we need to dismantle the empire, we need to create a way for letting know the people in the US what's going on the rest of the world because of the US. It's not just like, hey, watch us in Mexico. It's like, no, we are suffering because of something, you know, the US did something against us, and that was, for example, the Nafta. The Nafta in Mexico was just a complete mess. Like hundreds of thousands of people just migrate or just died or because of lack of food. Or now the war on drugs in Mexico, it's something that even when we are neighbors, people in the US don't have an idea of how many people have died during the last 14 years in Mexico. We're talking about like 200,000 people disappeared and officially 50,000 people killed. Officially, you know, and it's a complete massacre. What is going on? It's like when Trump says, like, yeah, they are rapists, and it's like, well, no, we don't have time to be the bad hombres while you are killing us, you know. And this is the kind of work that telesur is trying to show. um, Absolutely, the history of Latin America during the last 15 years wouldn't be the same without telesur. Telesur broadcasted the coup against Evo, against Manuel Zelaya in 2009, all the process against Lula in Argentina. You know, all of these process, the progressive movement, telesur is always there. And for example, in front of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, you remember, Ryan, sometimes I was the only one outside there, and it's not
Yeah.
like I was the only one. You know, sometimes there was RT or Hispan TV or something like that. But mostly the whole month that happened, everything, I was almost like the only one outside the embassy.
Wow.
And it was really, really hard, not only in terms of the role of telesur, but in personal, like in a personal way. I was harassed all day long by those fascists. They tried to break into my place. I had to move in Washington D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
because during those days someone tried to break into my place. So we're talking about
Yep.
like
Wow.
real fascists, and we are talking about that we need this kind of media showing what like the real face. And now, even not only with telesur, now as an independent journalist in DC, there were every single day there are marches or protests or something in DC because of BLM in DC. But there were days that, again, I was the only one, and all of the media is reporting on what Trump is saying, or Biden, or whoever, Nancy Pelosi. And as I said, it's like, I don't care about what they're saying. They are just the same thing for us in the rest of the world. And it's something that I'm trying to show to all my liberal friends that I don't have a lot now. I don't have many.
Same.
We're in the same boat. We're in the same boat.
And like at this point, I don't have time for liberal friends. But it's like, I don't care, and that's why it's so hard to be not only a journalist but like I consider myself an anti-imperialist journalist, and trying to dismantle these narratives. It's truly hard, like in my personal life, or just in general. It's really hard, but I'm so glad that a media outlet like telesur, that actually telesur was broadcasting the Empire Files with Abby
Right.
Martin.
We love the
Mhm.
Empire Files in this house. This
Okay.
is
We're-
an Abby Martin Stan account.
Yeah, we're Empire File stands here for sure.
Yeah, so I'm really glad
As you
that
can
the
see, I'm
media,
wearing-
like, yeah. I'm really glad that a media outlet like telesur exists and specifically in this moment of the history. And it's hard because actually I had to quit because of the U.S. sanctions. Most of telesur is a Venezuelan media outlet, not completely. It's like a multi-state media outlet, but mostly it's Venezuelan. And because of the U.S. sanctions, telesur couldn't pay me anymore while I was staying in DC. So
Wow.
I had to work for free as a militant, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but I need to buy some food. So
Yeah.
I had to quit. It was not because something happened. It was just because I couldn't stay no more with telesur because of the US.
Oh,
Of course. Of course.
That is
I wanted to ask you this. This is something I've been kind of curious about. I don't know if you've ever come across this question, but maybe you can help answer it. I've been wondering why or how was the Bolivia coup successful, but not the numerous coup attempts in Venezuela?
Wow, this is like the question that all the time people are asking to Evo. It's like how a government that was really successful just collapsed in a week, in less than a week. And there are so many explanations, but I think that Evo Morales, at least he's trying to explain that you never have to underestimate the oligarchy in your country and the role of the US in our nations. And basically that's why, it's like they at the end, and it's something that now in Venezuela they are still thinking what they can do, because when you don't complete a socialist project, you allow the oligarchy to still growing
Right.
in our nations. And it's something that happened in Venezuela for the last 10 years. And these Hugo Chavez took a lot of the companies, and now they're part of the states, but at the same time they couldn't at the end they couldn't just they were useless by the end of the Chavez administration. They didn't know how to use those companies, and they just broke. And that's why now, like, the monopoly of a lot of things, specifically about food, uh, were in hands of the opposition, of the fascists, you know. And that is something that they still don't know, like how to create a productive system that works under socialism. But the big mistake is that when you don't complete, and for example, they let people of the opposition in Venezuela, like Leopoldo Lopez or even Juan Guaido, just they were playing a democratic role as a government, but they were fascist, you know. And that's something that the people in Venezuela are really angry. They're pissed about just seeing Juan Guaido in the streets. They're like, no, you need to put him in jail.
Right.
And you know, it's part of the contradictions of these processes. But at the same time, I think that it's pretty different, because in Venezuela the coups are not successful because they are really conscious about who is the government, who's the opposition, who are the oligarchies, who is the US. And as I told you, like, I have a lot of friends who are saying, like, okay, if I'm gonna die, it's defending my country. I'm not gonna allow Juan Guaido and all of those fascists just to do whatever they want with Venezuela. And at the same time, the people have guns, you know. There are 3 million people in the militia, in the Venezuelan militia. It's not only the Venezuelan army. There are 3 million of people in the militias. So if the U.S. military or the Navy or whoever they want just try an invasion in Venezuela, they're gonna die. All of the people have guns to defend the country. You know, it's something that
like guns too.
well,
Yeah.
actually in the US you can have guns. The problem is that the left we are not like in the idea of having guns. And I don't know if it's a mistake after seeing what happened in Bolivia. And it's something that Evo Morales said, so like we should have had militias. And all of the opposition was like, well, now the government were like, yeah, he's trying to kill us. It's like, yeah, sure, you just killed dozens of indigenous people. It was, but you know, that's a big difference in Venezuela and Bolivia. That in Venezuela they have real popular militias, and in Bolivia they didn't. So also, for example, when I had the opportunity to talk with the one who was at some point a counselor of Evo Morales, and he was I was asking him, like, why did you invite the OAS to Bolivia, knowing that the OAS is trying to do whatever they want against Venezuela? And they were like, because they were sure that they were going to win. And that's true, they won. They won the elections, but they, once again, they underestimate the role of those the OAS, the fascists, the oligarchy, and the militaries who asked for the resignation of Evo. They were trained in the School of Americas, you know. Uh, so yeah, it's as I said, it's like the same script, but when you are in the government. And that's something that all the time I'm like the crazy woman of the coup d'etat in Mexico. It's like, just watch what happened in Bolivia, you know. Every single day I'm just trying to say, like, hey, we should take this seriously. We have a lot of lithium in the border with the US. We have a lot of the oligarchy who is really close to the Democrats, specifically. Actually, the far right party here in Mexico, the PAN, Partido Acción Nacional, they were calling for voting for Hillary Clinton in 2016. You know, they were here in the Senate with their T-shirts of Hillary, and I was like, I don't know if that's
Do you know what her husband did to Mexico? Like,
yeah, it's like, and you know, and now in Mexico, I don't think it's like a real progressive government, but it's the best that could happen in Mexico for the last century. And it has a lot of contradictions that the governments in Latin America had during the last 20 years. But it's the same script, and I'm really worried that something like that can happen. So when I see why I was successful in Bolivia, it's because it was a complete mistake to underestimate the oligarchy and the role of the US and the US imperialism in
Mhm.
our region.
Yeah, and that's what Lenin, teaches us. That it's really important to when you, in order to maintain your revolution and the dictatorship of the proletariat and the working class, it's to suppress and oppress the bourgeoisie from take, because otherwise they're going to do whatever they can to take power back, and that's what happened in Bolivia.
Yeah, and when you see what is going on in Cuba, you understand that you don't need to underestimate the oligarchy and the US imperialism. In
Right.
Cuba, they have the real controls of the means of production. They have the control of the education. When you go and you talk to the children, they say like, yeah, I know who was the Che Guevara. I know who was Vilma Espin. And they know the role of the women in the revolution. They know the role of, the relationship with Venezuela. They know who Evo Morales was. And it's completely different. And that's a battle that sometimes in the left, we are not really committed to give. That's the educational and the cultural revolution. It's
Mhm.
not only about having the means of production. When you have the means of production and the proletarian still things like the bourgeoisie, you're only going to repeat the same exploitation. It's not just because you are a worker that you deserve the means of production. Is you have to you need to have this conscious of what does it means to have the means of production. So that's something that in our government, in our, like for example in Ecuador, it's like the exactly that's what happened. They had the power, but they didn't do this educational thing. They didn't change the cultural thinking of the society, and that's why now you have a far right government helped by the oligarchy, and people are not really into mobilizing, or they are not trying to do anything. It's like, okay, we are gonna vote and that's enough. And at that point is now what we are, where we are in Mexico. It's like, okay, people believes that they changed this nation by voting, but it was only the start, you know and that's part of the real revolutions. Like, how do we change the conscience of the people and transform the society from the roots? It's not only about voting, it's not about Democrats and Republicans, it's not about just waiting until November. It's about a permanent change, a permanent transformation, a permanent revolution. And in Venezuela, you have that part. You have the people thinking about imperialism. Something that I was really surprised when I went is with, like, they have these cultural brigades, and you go and they start talking to you like, oh yeah, what would you like to have here in the neighborhood, like like what would you like to do, and just for fun or whatever. And people's like, yeah, we should have like a circle discussion about Rose Luxemburg. And it's like, what? What are you saying? And they just give books of Lenin, Marx, and
Awesome.
whoever. And and that's why they're still in power. It's not about Maduro. People who believe that Maduro is in power because he's a dictator and he doesn't listen to the population, it's because they haven't talked to the population. The population loves their government, and it's like they know that that there are a lot of contradictions. They hate a lot of the leaderships. They hate about, like, for example, the role of the military, because of course when you have a systematic aggression of the US, of course, I mean, it's something like I don't agree, but it's like pretty obvious that if the US wants to invade your country, it's obvious
We
that
need
you
it.
need the military in
Yeah, of
every
course.
single corner
Of
of your
course.
country. And I mean, it's not like I don't like that idea, but it's like, yeah,
Not just from outside, but
Yeah.
also inside, because there's counter-revolutionaries inside, like the bourgeois
yeah,
who
like
want
the
to take over, and
militias.
they have the means to do it. So that's why you got to have that. It's really important.
Yeah, and people are aware of the role of the military, you know, that the military is taking control of all over the situation in Venezuela, and of course they don't like it, but at the same time it's like, okay, but I'm helping in my neighborhood, I'm helping whatever. So that's the big difference in a lot of process, and it's the same in Cuba. Like when you go and you just talk to people, the people who experience the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista, of course they are saying like, of course everything changed after the revolution. But when you go and talk to the people, to the millennials and young people, it's like, it's just that I want I don't know, like a watch, a new computer or something like that, you know, because the propaganda, it's everywhere. And that's the synonym now in the world of success, that you have a car, that you have a house, that you travel all over the world. And in Cuba, like, sadly, it's happening, but at the same time there are so many people, especially also like people of like youth. The youth is it's an active part of the Cuban process nowadays, after 40, I don't know, like 50, 60 years of revolution, you know. And in Venezuela, of course, it's hard when you have the prices of the oil, I don't know, in $4 or $5 per barrel, when you have all this harassment of the US, when you have uh, these so-called sanctions, that these unilateral you know, decisions of the US government. Of course it's hard, but when the people is conscious that it's not the the government's fault, that's why they are still in power. And I say they, like the people, are still in power in Venezuela.
That was great. Wow.
Yeah. Should we move on to Mexico?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because you kind of touched on Mexico just a little bit earlier. I want to see what your thoughts are on Almo's policies. Has his policies shifted more leftward since he's taken office? And do you think he's taken more of an internationalist approach? And if so, how? How has he defied the U.S. and what policies has he implemented that triggered the U.S. to begin to turn its imperialist hand toward him and Mexico? And who are the right-wing forces that want to destabilize AMLO's government?
Well, first of all, AMLO won the elections in 2018 because, as I said, there were so many people killed, disappeared in this country for the last 14 years after Felipe Calderón started this war on drugs, quotes unquote, because it was a complete civil war, like every single war on drugs is in the rest of the world. So AMLO, it's a like he won. He's a democratically elected president. He won with 30 million of votes, more than 60% of the votes in Mexico. That it's something that we have never seen before in this country. We didn't experience like a dictatorship as it is known in Latin America, like a military dictatorship. We experienced a one ruling party during 80 years. And when the change in 2000 happened with Vicente Fox, it was the same. So that's why people were really tired, really frustrated, and they voted for AMLO, even when he didn't, and he doesn't consider himself like as a revolutionary or a socialist or anti-capitalist. He's not. He has never been. But people understood that it was the best thing that could happen for the Mexicans, and
It's
it
like a
was.
Bernie Sanders, right?
Yeah, it was like a Bernie Sanders. Actually, Bernie Sanders is like more leftist in terms, for example, of climate change. AMLO doesn't. Also, in LGBTQ issues, AMLO is super conservative. Is the worst, actually. But so that's why he won. And after that, he's trying to have like a, yeah, like a social democrat nationalist government. And it has, after a year and a half in power, he has like 65 or 70% of popularity in polls. It's a lot for a Mexican president, a lot. And he has a lot of support of the population. That's something that I cannot deny. But the contradictions are a lot. And in the relationship with the US, of course, it would be really full of AMLO to declare a war to the neighbor, considering it's the empire. It's something that even me as an anti-imperialist, it's something like I wouldn't do as a president. It's like you cannot do that. In the middle, you have 130 million of Mexicans and 30 million of Mexicans in the US, and you need to chill. It's like it's not that easy. And but during the last months, we've seen that AMLO has had not only like a friendship. It's weird to say it. I was inside the White House 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when AMLO went to visit Trump, and it was hard to me, like being inside the White House, listening to "Viva Mexico." I was like, "What's going on here?" But at the same time, he was like, "Yeah, we are friends, and we will be friends forever. And you don't have to get mad with me." And and he was like, "What's going on here?" And of course, but at the same time, AMLO has prioritizing the relationship with Latin America. Well, Evo Morales was a refugee here, and that's something that, of course, the U.S. I don't think Trump would have be happy, like, "Oh yeah, Evo Morales is our neighbor now." So, and also he received here in Mexico the president of Cuba, Diaz-Canel, the former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, the president of Argentina also was here in Mexico. Um, so in terms of the relationship of the US and Mexico, it's like they have to be friends in a way. And that's why AMLO, and I'm not trying to be so like, there are so many things that I wouldn't have done, but at the same time, I'm trying to understand this hard relationship with the US. And for example, this third country, how does it call, like in the border, that now the migrants have to wait in Mexico while they are waiting for the resolution of the asylum in the US. It's something against the Constitution and against the international law. So it's something that, and I know that AMLO, we didn't pay for the wall, for example. We didn't pay for the wall, but we became the wall in the south of Mexico. And it's so hard because we are doing exactly the same shit that we are denouncing that the US is doing against Mexican and Central Americans. And we're doing exactly the same in our borders now. And it's hard. It's something that even the people of the government are not saying anything. And it's, if you're a leftist, you have to denounce it, and you have to say this is not okay. And it's so sad that now people of the government are just keeping silence. They don't want to say anything in the role of Mexico with the Central American people who are seeking asylum in the US or here in Mexico. It's so sad, that thing. And as I said, like at the same time, they are trying to prioritize the relationship with Latin America. They are trying to prioritize this organization that was pretty important during the progressive government, that is the CELAC, and was part of this part of the nature of this progressive movements in all of the region, with the ALBA, the CELAC. teleSUR was actually part of that. teleSUR as a conception, and we need a new media for this new era of the region. So AMLO is trying to put pressure in his government to have a new relationship with Latin America, but at the same time, it's like we are not gonna confront the US. And in the White House all the time he said, so like, yeah, we are friends, right? And Trump was like, well, yeah. So it's hard. It's hard.
But do you think he's playing more? It's more like a. Do you think AMLO is playing more of like a three-dimensional chess game?
Yeah, but at the same time, as I said, it's like he's not anti-imperialist, he's not anti-capitalist, he's a nationalist who's trying to prioritize the national bourgeoisie instead of just dismantle every single bourgeoisie in the region. So it's like he has his own limits. And the problem is that now here in Mexico, of course, we don't have like a mass movement, like a socialist massive movement who is trying to push him to the left. Sadly, the only movement that we have, and it's not like it's our fault at all, it's like we've been surviving during the last 14 years. You know, it's like if you are a socialist or just defending your territory or the human rights, you deserve to die. So there are so many people who were killed in this country, journalists. So it's not like, oh, you don't know how to build a massive movement. No, it's because they were killing us during the last 14 years. So the most radical thing, sadly, here in Mexico now is the government and the feminist movement. And part of the contradictions of the government is that the AMLO all the time is like, oh, the feminist movement is so conservative, they are our enemies and they're just trying to overthrow my government. It's like, no, we know that the patriarchy didn't start with you, but he's really conservative in a lot of issues. In the LGBTQ, it's like, oh my God, he's so bad against the feminist movement all the time. Even now that he's in power, of course, he cannot still say like the movement, the social movements are our allies. He is now against a lot of them. So it's hard. So I don't know at which point it's just trying to be friend and trying to be the best president ever and have the best relationship ever with the US. And at the same time, it's like maybe he believes that that's the way to do it. You know, like just let's be friend with Donald Trump and that's it. So who knows?
Okay, Alina, I know that you kind of have to go shortly, but I am wondering about, I know that we've made it clear that that none of us really have much faith in the Democratic Party at all, but what do you think a Joe Biden presidency would look like for Latin America? And how do you think it would differ from Trump?
Well, actually, even the impression now in Latin America after Donald Trump's presidency and after Obama's administration specifically is that we, or most of us now, we are really aware that imperialism is about both of the parties. And as I said, for example, in Venezuela, the real difference is like, okay, Biden is just proposing TPS for Venezuela and Trump doesn't, just that. But both of them wants an intervention and wants to kill Maduro, you know. And in Latin America, it's the same. Like we experienced under Obama this idea that something could change, at least for the region, because we would have a person who would be more aware. You know, a peace Nobel Prize for us was like, oh, maybe something can change, but no. And now we are aware that Obama deported more people that Trump has done, and we know it. And for us, it's exactly the same shit. It's like, of course, we don't care about Joe Biden, even if he has dementia. It's like, even we know at this point that the ruling class is not about only Trump and Joe Biden. It's about the military complex industry. It's like about, you know, it's like, well, yeah, even if they want to choose your, it's like the video games. If you choose your character, go ahead. But it's the same thing behind both of them. So I don't know. I've been thinking about this specifically with Mexico. What would be the role of an administration under Biden? And I'm not really sure that there are a lot of difference. The only thing it's like the politically correctness, you know. Under Obama, it was like, okay, maybe we should put pink bombs instead of just putting bombs or things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, and we are not gonna tweet that we're going to bomb. We just do it, and so in
Liberals
Mexico,
really want to put the mask back on to
They
hide
want,
the
they want a
ethnicity.
pretty face on the empire.
Yeah.
yeah, so for us it's like actually if you ask here in Mexico or in Latin America if Trump, well, now I think they are really aware that he's Republican, but at the beginning or just a year ago, it was not a discussion even if you ask like an average person in Latin America who was Republican or who was Democrat, I bet that 90% or 99% of the people don't know who was Republican and who was Democrat. So for us, it's not like a big deal. It's like,
They're the
okay,
same.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, and I don't know, maybe my impression is that the Republicans do it more aggressively, more well, as it happened in Bolivia, just that. But in terms of, I don't know, even I've been asking people in the government, like, what would you be thinking? Like, you as part of the government, would you prefer to deal with Democrats or to Republicans? And actually, there are, and it's hard because people in the government, like I have, well, I mean, now it's something I really appreciate that people who I've been marching with my whole life now are in the government. They're congressmen. They're, you know, it's people from like me. They're my friends from university. So it's a real popular government. Um, so they're like, well, okay, we had to deal with Donald Trump for the last years, and now we know how to do it. So for us, we don't have any problem if they just continue with the Republicans. You know, it's like they know they've been doing it. They were successful with this new commercial deal, and so it's just about these kind of details, but at the same time it's like we are waiting for the worst all the time.
That's so depressing. That's so stressful.
It is, it is.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry for my country.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the rest of the world, you know. We have to deal with this
Well, same
every
with
single
empire.
day.
We gotta get rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard because even as I said, like all the time trying to talk with my friends in the US, and it's like uh, we wouldn't be so tired in Latin America if people in the US were doing their job. You know, it's like I know that that my role, for example, as a Mexican, denouncing the atrocities against the Central Americans in the border, it's hard. And it's something that the Central Americans shouldn't be doing. It's something that I need to do because my government is messing with them. And it's something I know I'm not like the best reporter ever, but I'm trying to denounce it. And I'm trying to say we don't have to be the same that we are denouncing in the US. We need to stop these atrocities in the border. We cannot be the wall, you know? But in the US, it's like, it's not only about what the US is doing against Mexico. It's about what they're doing literally to the rest of the world, what they're doing helping Israel against Palestine, what they're doing against the people in Chile supporting the oligarchy in that country, what are they doing, what they did in El Salvador during the Civil War. And for example, that's something that it's really, really sad that they are now blaming on the people who are trying to seek for a better future in the US, when the real problem was that the US helped in the civil war that displaced thousands and thousands of people from El Salvador. And actually a lot of these people went to California and they learned how to be like the Maras. The Maras started in the MS-13, started in California, and
Right.
they deported them to El Salvador. And the violence that now that they are experiencing in El Salvador was because of the U.S. Just that simple. And they are
Yep.
blaming American, like, no.
And the U.S. also has trained and funded the drug cartels there as well.
Yeah, and now that you say so, I remember that during Hillary Clinton administration, like Hillary Clinton as in the State Department, she was the first person who said that the narco groups in Mexico should be called terrorists, and they related this idea of terrorists, and I don't know how, but they said during Hillary Clinton as in the State Department that that the groups of narco traffic here in Mexico had connection with Qasem Soleimani.
What?
Yeah, that's true.
Wow.
That's true. Yeah, and there are so many things that they've been creating to
They
attack
were
our
saying that
countries.
Hezbollah.
Yeah.
They were saying that Hezbollah was in Venezuela.
Yeah, and it sounds really funny, but it's like there are people who really believe so.
It's wild.
So I just have been like, I don't know how to respond to that.
You don't have to. It's like, and this is the story of our nations every single day. Like just waiting for the US to say something against Venezuela, against Cuba, against Nicaragua, and wait for Fox News, MSNBC, or, like you can find differences when you see even the corporate media in the US. Yeah. And
they just project their crimes onto like other people
totally.
they want to overthrow, other states, and
and
that's what they do.
And
they
it's
project
the same.
their crimes.
And it's the same, like the Democrats and Republicans, you can find a lot of difference maybe at this point in the US policy, but when it comes about foreign policy, it's exactly the same. And it's the same with, for example, the corporate media. You can watch, and there are so many differences, for example, with Fox News and wherever, but when they report on Mexico, when they report on Venezuela, on Nicaragua, on Cuba, on Palestine, this exactly the same, all the time. They're trying to justify all the atrocities of the US imperialism in our countries. So it's something that we've been dealing for decades. It's not something new. It's not about Mexico. It's not about Chile. It's not about Venezuela. It's not even about only Bolivia. Bolivia was just like the last chapter of US imperialism in our region. But it's all the fucking time, and of course it's tired.
I wonder why.
Surviving. Yeah.
I mean, it's right after they take their commercial break, after they shit on Latin America, what comes on the commercial? Oh, Lockheed Martin. Oh, a Boeing commercial. How convenient.
Yeah, all the time. So now it's pretty sad. For us, it's like we are not really aware of the elections. It's like, yeah, okay, go and vote. But for us, even it was like a lot of hope, or at least a little hope, when people were talking about Bernie Sanders. That was like the only thing that I've seen that people are really aware of the US electoral system. It's like maybe someone like Bernie Sanders, and of course, because it was pretty similar to AMLO. So when they saw that Bernie Sanders, even when he's still Democrat, no? And
he's an imperialist.
Yeah, he is. But at least he was saying something like, we should respect Bolivia. And, and for us, it's like a lot. Considering
like he still like repeated the CIA talking points. Maduro's a dictator.
It's so frustrating because on one hand they'll denounce the physical action of the government, but then on the other hand they'll validate
they'll play both sides. They'll do the both sides thing.
Yeah, but I
remember there was the Richard Branson concert at the Venezuela-Colombia border, and Bernie had said before that he opposed the coup and didn't recognize Guaido or whatever, but then he said that they had to let the humanitarian aid in through the border. And it was like, well, everyone knows that that humanitarian aid was put together by Elliot Abrams. Why should he be trusted? Bernie, if you actually are principled, you should be denouncing this fucking charade of the humanitarian aid and just stand against US imperialism.
Yeah, and he didn't, you know, and that's why we are always frustrating, and for me at some point it was like at the beginning when I moved to DC, I was really sad, like what I'm doing here, you know, I hate the empire and I'm in the empire, so I didn't know. But at this point it's like, yeah, now I know, I'm aware that I needed to do the same labor, communicated what's going on in Latin America, not only for Latin Americans. We need to let the people in the US who really can stop these tragedies, what's going on in the rest of the world, you know. And when you just turn on the TV and you just watch CNN, MSNBC, or whatever, it's like, of course people in the US won't know what's going on in the rest of the world. So yeah, that's why I cannot stop being a journalist. You know, I didn't study journalism, I studied international affairs, but at some point it was like my necessity to communicate to the rest of the people, like we need to
You have a
change.
home here, Alina. Anytime you want to sound off, you got something to share, you just hit up Ryan. You're
On the red lettuce.
You will come, you can come on here and you can tell
Perfect.
leftists in the United States in English and in Spanish, whatever other languages you speak, you tell them, get your shit together and stop legitimizing these sparse elections. And just
Yeah, please. Please. And at the end, please.
Shit together. Get your anti-imperialist shit together, please.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do, definitely. I mean,
you got footage you want to show? Bring it on.
Awesome.
For you.
Thank you.
That was really wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You have to go right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to be on air.
Yeah, no, Alina, before you go, please let our viewers know where they can find your work.
Well, I'm in Twitter as Alina Duarte _, in Instagram _ Alina Duarte, and also in Facebook. I'm gonna try to do more content in English. Sometimes it's like there's a lot going on that I cannot even do it in Spanish, but I'm gonna try to do more content in English. I'm trying to participate in these kind of spaces that I really appreciate your invitation. And of course, I'm gonna be here whenever you want. I think it's something that definitely we need to do. And thanks once again for the invitation.
Well, thank you so much for joining the Red Lettuce, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you. Of course, I'll be here.
Bye, Alina.